So our speaker tonight has had a notable 24-year career in the U.S. Army. He has a prestigious educational background, which includes a master's in business and a master's in national security affairs. Prior to coming to Manatee County, Mr. Mills served as the Chief Executive Officer of the Minneapolis Public Schools. He's here to tell us about his first 100 days as Superintendent of Schools here in Manatee County. So please help me welcome our Superintendent of Schools, Rick Mills.
Well, good evening. It's such a pleasure to be here this evening with all of you and enjoy a pleasant dinner and nice wine, and I'm very excited always to be out in the community at luncheons and dinners and breakfasts. Just telling my table this morning I have a 6:30 breakfast tomorrow at the West Bradenton Country Club with the Rotary there. And I really welcome these opportunities to get out in the public and share all the great things and the great employees that we have in the school district and how we're moving forward. And of course, we all know that there's been challenges, and I'll talk a little bit about that as I've gone through the first 4 months, but just very, very excited to be here. And I say this repeatedly over and over at every venue I speak at. I've never, ever in my 37 years of career as a career leader ever been so warmly welcomed and received by a community as I have here. And so that was just extremely pleasant for me to come here to Manatee County and get the warm reception and the gracious hospitality that all of you have provided me, and now my wife that I just moved down here 3 weeks ago, who's now teaching in Hillsborough County. So the nepotism policy is live and well. The prayer by Abraham Lincoln kind of reminded me, one of my first interviews that I did with Katie Bergen from the Sarasota Herald Tribune. She wanted fun facts about Rick Mills, and she asked me, one of the questions was, if you were stranded on a desert island, name the 3 people that you would like to be on there with. And so I gave a lot of thought, and I responded back with first Mother Teresa, because of her compassion and service, and to learn about that and be able to be mentored around that. The second one was Abraham Lincoln, and his wisdom, his courage, his moral courage, his perseverance, his leadership during a very crucial time would be inspiring to me to share time with him around that. The third one is kind of a unique one, and if you really think about it, probably an obvious one, but my third choice was the last winner of the Survivor show. Makes sense, doesn't it? So I did this interview, and Katie published it, and my wife read it the next day, and she wasn't on the island. So I was off the island for a while. And got back on the island, obviously. She's moved down here. But again, such a pleasure to be here. I want to recognize our board members, our chair, Karen Carpenter, our vice chair, Julia Ranabar. Mr. Miner was here earlier. I know he wanted to be there last night for the budget hearing, but I'll take ownership of that for him not being there. And I know he really wanted to be there. We tried to make that work. But really good public hearing last night. We are very, very well into the budget process and publishing a very realistic, executable budget that we're very confident in. And I've said this over and over again. I'm never going to present anything other than I believe has integrity, has ethics, and that we as a team firmly believe is something that we're proud to present to the public, to the community, and to the board. So I was asked just a little bit to share about my career, other than a couple of gracious lines that were shared. I'm kind of a unique educator, hybrid educator, in my road to superintendency. Started out in the military, in the Army, enlisted out of high school. Spent 3 years, then I went off to college. I got my degree, my commission as a second lieutenant, went back in as an officer, went from second lieutenant up to lieutenant colonel, commanded a tank company, I commanded a cavalry squadron, I taught at West Point for 3 years. I spent a lot of time in the Middle East in my career, in Korea and Europe, and had just had a really wonderful career. I got to travel to about 38 countries during my career, both professionally and personally. And I had a very enriching career in life so far that I feel very blessed for. So I spent 21 years as an officer, did the things that I mentioned, and I had the opportunity to meet with, for 3 days, the CEO of Chicago Public Schools at the time, Paul Vallis, who convinced me to think about a career change and go from service to country to service to students. And I went up to Chicago about a month or two later, spent a weekend with him and the team there in Chicago, went to the schools, went to the city, and was very, very inspired about the opportunity to be a leader in education and provide a quality education for our youth in this country. So I opted to do that. I went there a year later after I changed command and retired, and got up there and Paul had already left. So he went off to run for governor. But I was fortunate in many respects to work with great people up there. Mayor Daley, what a wonderful mayor. I had a really great working relationship with him. He was very supportive of education. He actually was in charge of the school district there in the city of Chicago. Arnie Duncan, Barbara Sawakas. There was a great team there for a long time, for 8 years plus. And I learned a lot about education. And I went in there at a director level position, rose to be an area superintendent of 26 high schools, about 27,000 students in Chicago, and schools all over the city, large area neighborhood schools of 3,500 students, small magnet type schools of 600. We had 6 military academies in Chicago, 5 of them, or 4 of them and a half I opened while I was there in a leadership role, and really got inspired during that time to take my career to eventually become a superintendent. And so I looked for that next job as an area superintendent to prepare myself for superintendency. So I took the CEO job up in Minneapolis Public Schools, a very rewarding assignment, great folks up there, and spent 21 months there running the day-to-day operations for Minneapolis Public Schools. I got my superintendent license while I was up there in the state of Minnesota, and was very blessed and fortunate with the opportunity to come down and participate in the hiring process for your superintendent, which I got to say, and I've said this before, was a very thorough, equitable, and fair hiring process that I just sing accolades about. And I will tell you that as a candidate, the way it was done better prepared me in many respects for superintendency, having the privilege of being selected around meeting the community during the process. I believe I was in this very room on the first night of the interviews, meeting the community, talking to community members. What were the concerns about education? What were the challenges? Allowing the opportunity for the community to meet with me, get to know me. It was just an absolutely superb process in selecting your superintendent. And so my hat's off to the board for doing that. I always got to put the plug in for the board. I really value the board that we have in moving forward. They've been very supportive of me, and we are headed for greatness in this school district as we move forward with this team and move this school district. So people want to know, okay, well, tell us about the first 100 days and what was that like? What did you learn? And I could tell you, I sent an email out to the principals yesterday basically saying my first 4 months here was a complete blur. I visited all 50 plus of our schools. I talked to every staff and faculty. I talked to every department in the district. I was out in the community at lunches and dinners and breakfasts and weekends and events. And it was very intentionally done around the 4 goals in my entry plan, my 100-day entry plan, and very deliberate around what did I want to accomplish in those first 100 days. And I will tell you, all of our board members have been very supportive of me, of getting me out to the community, inviting me, making sure I'm meeting the folks in the community. And I very much value and appreciate that in getting that guidance and advice, because board members know their community, and they need to get you out there to meet the folks that you need to get out and talk to. So I visited 51 schools, and I shared this little vignette kind of at the table. I was at Manatee Elementary School talking to the staff and faculty, and at the end of my presentation, I asked for questions or comments or feedback. And one of the teachers up front raised her hand and she goes, I just want to say, I've been in the school district for 34 years. And I met my first superintendent my first year teaching, and I just met my second. So you never underestimate the power of getting out and meeting your folks, meeting your team, spending time in your schools or in your organization or whatever it is, because it's so valuable to get that feedback, that interface with your team and that personal aspect of it. And it's very touching and endearing to me to hear comments like that, that people in the organization value getting to know and meet their superintendent. So I found that to be very rewarding. And getting out and getting to know all our folks and hear from them equally rewarding, because at the end of those 100 days, I went back and presented my findings of what I heard from everybody. And I shared that with everybody in the district, primarily in a large audience of administrative leadership, but videotaped and presented on our website. And I believe it's still on there if you want to see it. But I shared for about the first 45 minutes, hour, what did I hear, what did I see, and what were our common challenges that we had, and then where is our vision moving forward. And I have a very clear vision of what it's going to take to move our school district to greatness, but I don't want to come in here for right off and just assume that I've got all the answers, I know it all, because I have to value and hear and listen how we can all come together to move this forward. So I was very deliberate in not sharing any vision until after 100 days, and I've been out and heard from everybody before I shared that. But that was shared on June 11th in a televised and recorded video that is on our website, and spent about 2 to 3 hours with our administrative leadership sharing that. So many of the findings you probably read about or heard about already. I don't want to belabor many of them, and I'll just give it in a very short summary. We have been fiscally dysfunctional as a school district for years. And that's really accurate and true to say. And I'm not here in any way to malign any previous leadership or anything, but I do believe in what I've read in many great books that I've read. I'm a voracious reader of leadership books, education books, management books. One of the best books I ever read was Good to Great by Jim Collins. And he talks about if you want to be a great organization, you have to identify the brutal facts. Okay, you have to identify what your challenge is, what your assessment is, and you have to share it. You have to kind of rally around it and then move forward beyond it. So much of what I share is with the intent of just sharing the brutal facts. So the brutal facts are, and I think everybody widely recognizes, we've had some significant challenges around our budget. I sat with the budget team through the budget process, and I'm not going to share too much about it, but it just mortified me on what I heard of how things were done in the past. But we're shifting in a different direction, and we're moving forward. And I'm very confident about the budget we recently presented, the tentative budget. And I want to be very transparent about it. I've opened it up to anybody from the public if you want to come in and see our books. I've asked for an additional public hearing this month. And I want community input and feedback. I'm going to reinstate the budget committee as we move forward. It's one of the items on the audit. I want to be totally transparent and ethical, and everything that we have confidence in and is accurate and executable. So that's one of the challenges that we have, and we're moving quickly behind it. And I think I mentioned at the table again, just in a brief conversation, I left Minneapolis on March 15th. There was about 2.5 feet of snow. I left it in my rearview mirror as I drove out of St. Paul. And we're leaving past budgets in the rearview mirror. So what else did I hear? We have a very significant problem with employee morale. I heard it from the teachers. I actually shared this story with the teachers when I went out and talked to all of them. The night I got the call from Karen for the job, we got excited about it, my wife and I. So when it calmed down a little bit, she went in the other room to do something, and she had her computer, and I heard her scream. And she runs in with a computer. I said, "What are you screaming about?" She goes, "I just looked at the pay scale for teachers in Manatee County." It's true. I mean, we have some real challenges around our pay scale, but more importantly, how have we taken care of our employees in the district, in this district, and how do we support them? And so I'm very grateful for the state and the funding for the salary increases for our teachers, but we have a lot of other people in the district that have suffered equally during the tough economic times, so we're moving forward with up to a 2% increase for the rest of our employees out of this fiscal recovery plan that we came up with. So that is a real challenge, and I've read many books, and I've cited this, and one of the great books that I've read recently is The Advantage, written by Patrick Lencioni, where he says organizational health trumps everything else in being a great organization. So I've shared this as I went out to the schools and all the departments, that I am a firm believer in what Lencioni says. If you don't have great organizational health and morale, you're never going to be a great organization. So that means we have to take on the challenges of what has been keeping us from being a great school district around organizational health. So if you read the book, Lencioni talks in there about how great organizations operate beyond the light. Now, what does that mean? There's two things that are key to an organization's success. One, organizational health, and the second being putting systems and processes and protocols and procedures in place that drive performance around HR, around academics, around finance, around all the core functions of your organization. And for us as a school district, there are about 7 or 8 core functions that we need to do and do well. So he talks about processes and organizational health. So when he talks about being in the light, organizations that are mediocre or let's say mediocre to good, they want to operate in the light. They want to operate around data. They want to operate around what they do well in the business side, et cetera. But they never want to get to the real heart of the issue of how do you take on building organizational health. So he talks about how do you go about doing that, and he talks about organizations that don't do that are operating in the light only and not what the challenges are about moving organizational health. So he talks about a little story in there, and we all remember I Love Lucy. And Ricky comes home one day, and he sees Lucy in the living room on all fours looking for something. And he goes, "Lucy, what are you doing?" And Lucy says, "I'm looking for something." And he goes, "What did you lose?" And she goes, "I lost my earring." And he goes, "You lost your earring in the living room?" And she goes, "No, I lost it in the bedroom." And he goes, "Well, why are you in the living room looking for it?" She goes, "The light's better out here." Well, we can't be an organization that operates in the light because we have many challenges around organizational health and how do we build employee morale and welfare. And the first thing you do is you build it through trust, you build it through caring leadership, you build it by showing your employees you value them, you communicate to your employees, you get out and you spend time with your employees, and you build up that team and that respect. And so part of the 100 days has been very much part of that. So the last thing I want to talk about, what I've learned, and I'm sure Don will share some of this too, we have absolutely, at this point, or I'm going to say it, we are quickly transitioning from this state, and the state was, we are or have been as a school district completely dysfunctional, completely, beyond the budget, okay? And I don't want to scare you because I am so excited about where we're going, so let me just preface it with that. But go back to the brutal facts. If you just look at some simple things as an organizational perspective, we have some real challenges in HR. Okay, we're doing basically one core function, probably in a medium capacity, when we should be doing 3 or 4 core functions. In finance, we've never had a director of budget. How do you do an annual budget process if you don't have somebody that's in charge of it? So we were moving forward with that. What we've done is we've come in and we put a great organizational structure in place to address the needs of the district around the core functions that we have to do well to be a great organization. And we put positions in place to lead us to do that. And once we did that, we went out and recruited really talented, capable people. So tonight we had really our first cabinet meeting with the team for 2 hours in my office, my conference room. And I looked around the room there, and I thought, wow, we just built a huge talented team that's going to take the school district to greatness. Right, Don? So Don and Diana came in with me, and they've been very much at the early part of helping me with this reorganization and going out and recruiting great talented people. Now that doesn't mean that we did it all external. We got great people internally, but you need a blended balance of it. And I just was in awe of the team that I was sitting there with today, and the leadership and the experience and the skills in there that we need for that greatness. And so we're very much bringing to closure our reorganization and our hiring that supports that. We still have some key positions to fill, but we are putting the team in place to make that happen. I'm very comfortable and confident in saying that. So obviously we have challenges beyond what I said as a dysfunctional organization. We're correcting that. I think for about the first couple of months, Don and Diana and I would commiserate every day, saying, what did we find out now? And I've actually put together kind of a list of things that we have accumulated. And one of the great things about when you bring in qualified, highly talented people with the necessary competencies and skills is you find out even more that you need to fix. But that is a good thing, because we have to get that. And now we're at the point where it's that trickle effect, right? Don't we even talked about that the last couple of days? Kind of, it's trickling down. So I feel very good about where we're at as a school district and where we're going. And we presented that vision. That vision will move forward with implementing an academic educational performance management structure and system that will be built around the effective use of data. Strategic planning, we're going to go back and rewrite the district strategic plan. Then we're going to write an academic plan that's purely focused on academic outcomes. And then we're going to ask our business operations side to write their plans that support the academic and district plan, and all the academic departments to write their plan to support the academic plan. Then we'll have total alignment at that level around the district and the academic plan. Then we're going to implement a complete alignment of our resources around the plans. When you want to do your annual budget process and your long-range financial planning for budget, you need to align it to your strategic plan. Okay, so we're gonna go through that process. And then we're going to put in a performance management system where we're monitoring the execution of our plans, and we're measuring the performance around it and having the good discussions. If we're not seeing progress, why are we not seeing progress? Why are we not seeing this metric increase? So we'll implement that. And the last thing we're really going to do is start leveraging technology to the highest level. And Don and I put something together up in Minneapolis, and he put together a plan with a great team up there to get us to the point in education, technology use in 21st century learning, where you're leveraging technology to the full level exponentially for outcomes. And so that is very much the vision where we're moving forward, that will instill a vision, that will instill and implement a plan, that will put a system in place to monitor our execution and to leverage technology. But in the end, we have to make sure there's an alignment of all our resources, all our budget, all our assets to the work that we're doing, and get out of the business, which is typical in education. This sounds good, let's buy this. Okay, we can't afford that, nor should we be doing that. And so one of my favorite movies, and if you've never seen it, is Moneyball. Have any of you seen it? I tell you, I've seen that movie 15 or 20 times, and I always go back to about 4 or 5 leadership teaching points of how to lead an organization to greatness on a shoestring budget. Okay, if you haven't seen it, it's a great movie, but that's kind of my philosophy. And how do you build accountability and performance in there, and how you're best utilizing your resources around outcomes that you can measure and you can make adjustments to. So we have a great future as a school district. I am very, very comfortable to saying I'm confident. We are going to achieve greatness. We have a great team in place now in the district at the level. One of the best things that I saw on my 51 visits to schools was we really have great teachers and really good teams in the schools. We really do. And I left there with a sense of hope as the superintendent that we have great teachers, we have great staffs in the schools and great principals, and that we have the foundation to build on for that greatness that we all expect and want, and we owe it to our students. So I felt very, very good about that. I told them that. I'm reinforcing that, and that's what we need to build on, and that's what we need to do to move forward. We need a complete alignment of how we're going to stay focused, how we're going to move forward, how we're going to align our resources, how we're going to hold ourselves accountable, and how we're going to be transparent. We have to rebuild our trust with the public. We have to be able to retrust our trust with our employees. And so very excited to be here, very excited to be your superintendent. And we have a great future. We're moving in the right direction. We're doing it quickly. I would say almost light speed. And we're going to make this happen. So very, very pleased to be here. I look forward to your questions. But I understand I'm supposed to introduce Dr. Diana Green. Where's Diana? Oh, she tore her MCL last night. You may not know this, but she's going to go back and get an MRI. But as she walked into the board meeting and that little slope there, something popped, and what a trooper. She sat through the whole public hearing in excruciating pain from probably tearing an MCL. And then afterwards, I didn't know it happened until after the board meeting was over, and there seemed to be this fuss around her over there about being in pain, and I found out what happened. And she probably don't want to tell you. We got her in a chair. We wheeled her out to the car, took her over to the hospital, and so she has to follow up with that. But gosh darn if she wasn't at work today. And I told her, what are you doing here? But what a trooper, very committed, great professional. She's our deputy superintendent for instructional services. Very, very proud to have her on the team. She's highly qualified, highly capable. I think anybody that's seen her talk at a board meeting or in public or have any interaction, it just doesn't do anything but instill confidence that this lady knows academics and instruction, and she's going to help move us forward. So I regret she's not here tonight to make a few remarks and to answer your questions. But we do have Dawn Hall here tonight, our Deputy Superintendent for Business and Operations. Interesting story with Dawn. We had to hire a new CIO up in Minneapolis, and so we did a national search and posting. He was selected to interview. It didn't take me 15 minutes in the interview to figure out this is the guy for the job. He's highly credible, highly established, highly accomplished in his career field, both in education and information technology, widely considered one of the top 10 CIOs in the country. And that isn't anything but being recognized from a national perspective. He's got experience in multiple school districts. He's got experience as a consultant that went out and did technology audits for school districts across the country. Just a really, really tremendous individual, human being, and leader, and we're very fortunate to have him here. Feel very fortunate to have him on my team. So just perfect example with Diana and Dawn, the great talented leaders we're bringing in here to move this school district, and it goes beyond them. I just sat in that room again today in awe of the talent we have here and where we're going. So I'm going to turn this over to Don and allow him a few minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Now, I only have 67 slides in the PowerPoint presentation tonight. I don't need one. Actually, I am honored to be here. I have been here a little over 2.5 months now, and I have learned a lot in that period. I've been in education for over 20 years, and I have seen some things here that I've never seen anywhere else. But, you know, the bottom line is I get asked regularly, well, why did you come to Manatee County? And I said, well, spending 6 months in Minnesota from December through May should answer it. Because if that wasn't enough, I learned that weather is only for polar bears and crazy people. And I'm hopefully neither. But I want to tell you a little different story. The reason I came, I did a lot of research. And I'm not from Minneapolis, as some of you can probably pick up from my accent. I'm a Southerner, born and raised. I was from a single-parent welfare family in rural eastern Kentucky. That's how I grew up. We were the ones on food stamps, but in the days when it was considered very bad to be on it. You didn't have any pride in receiving that kind of assistance. But my mother did the best she could with 3 boys, and I was the oldest of 3. My father passed away very early in my life, but he was an alcoholic and absentee father. So as I started going through school, I did very well in school. School was a very comfortable place for me. And so I started talking about going to college. Well, the thing that was so strange about it is no one in my family or extended family had ever even graduated high school. So here was this crazy guy talking about going to college. And so as I progressed through middle school and high school, again, academically, that was a breeze. I then set off to go to college. And when I did, my mother said, well, I don't want you coming back. And I wasn't quite sure what she meant. But what she meant was she didn't want me coming home anymore because she didn't see the value in education. She felt like I was abandoning her. It took over 2 years to get past that. Now, why do I go into all of that? I have been very blessed in my career to not only go to college, but graduate school, multiple schools. I have been literally all over the world as a consultant for Microsoft. Rick was kind enough to give you all the background, so I'm not going to go through all that. But I have seen firsthand the impact that education can have for transforming a life. And I can see what happens when it's not available. And so, why do I still do the jobs I do? Why did I choose to come here? One very simple reason. There's another Don Hall sitting out there somewhere in this community. There's probably several. And they may be the next national ranked CIO. They may be the next future president, a surgeon, a writer, an artist. But they don't see that possibility today. And it's our job to help them see that possibility for themselves and to ensure we provide every opportunity for them to achieve it. And so I've said all along, I'm going to be the voice for the student without one. And that's why I do what I do. I love being a part of school systems. I've really enjoyed being in Manatee County. It's a beautiful place to live. I've enjoyed being welcomed the way I have. And what I want, I met with every employee group as well. I've met a lot of people in the past few months. And what I told every employee group, and I'll close with this, when we are done, I want you, and I was pointing at each one of them, I want you to be able to walk out into this community, hold your head high, look people straight in the eye, and say with pride, I work for the Manatee County School District. That is what I want for our employees. I want for our students to say, I received a great foundation in education by going to Manatee schools. It's that simple. Now, it's not going to be simple to get there, but the goal is very clear to me. So again, thank you very much for the time, and thank you for the warm welcome.
And Mr. Hall, if you want to stand up here in case anybody has questions for you.
Is this where the games begin?
This is the fun part.
Should I have brought my gladiator outfit?
As long as it's not a spelling bee.
So as you notice, we do have a microphone set up in the center of the room. So if you'd like to ask a question, please come up to the microphone. As Mr. Mills or Mr. Hall is answering your question, we ask that the next person then be ready with their question. Alrighty? So let the games begin.
Come over here, my wingman.
Hi, good evening. My name is Misty Servia, and my question is about the modified Wednesday schedule. As a parent, I was really less than excited to hear about that, not just for the disruption for parents and children, but I know it was ineffective when it was in place. So can you talk about how that is going to work this time and why it's going to be better?
First of all, I wish Diana were here because we had some discussions around that and how we were going to implement professional development during the school year with the challenges that we have right now with our budget situation. A lot of school districts will buy time to come in and do the professional development at other times earlier before the school year, et cetera. But unfortunately, we're not in a position fiscally to be able to do that. We looked at different options. This was an option that had been used in the past, but as I understand, wasn't necessarily used effectively is the best use. And it was done every Wednesday. So we came up with an option where we wanted to do it one Wednesday a month. It's only 7 Wednesdays out of the year, and we want to use that time to professionally develop our team, particularly around the Common Core and the standards of that and how we're going to implement that. And so we're using about an hour and a half of the curtailed or abbreviated school day to do that, but it's only 7 days out of the year. And I will say this, I do apologize for the short nature of that, but when you change the school calendar, you have a very short window to do that, to get that out. So if it was sprung in a way that came across like last minute, I'll take responsibility for that. But as the superintendent and as the deputy superintendent for instructional services, we felt it was very necessary that we needed to do to move forward, and we had very marginal time to get it out there to make that change.
Thank you.
Would this be a budget question?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, out of all the people in this room, I think I'm one of the few citizens that really understand what you've both been up against. I was at the budget meeting Thursday night, and I'm not sure I got the whole thing, but they were saying how we have increased health care costs in our self-insured plan. It seemed like it was a large amount to me. I'd like to know, what was that amount again? And from what I understood, it was attributable to the new rules from Obamacare that's increasing our health insurance costs.
You can fill that one.
Oh, thank you.
I'm just going to go over and get my iced tea.
Okay, this is like Abbott and Costello. Who's on first? As far as the healthcare piece itself, there are several things at play. One is there are some new costs coming down to us administratively through the federal health plan, and so we are having to bear those costs. Today I met with Aon, who is our broker for benefits for the district, and one of the things we were talking about is how do we maintain or constrain cost. A few years ago, the self-insured health plan was actually running a deficit. Today, it's running in the positive because of some positive actions that were taken. There is enough in the health fund reserve that will keep us from having to raise the rates this year on our employees. But just like a fund balance, you only get to spend that once. And so our actuaries are saying that in order to look another year out to keep up with the cost of health care as it continues to escalate, we will probably have to increase the health care costs 2 years, so in the 14-15 year. And so what we're trying to do is figure out, how do you balance keeping cost containment or the cost in line while at the same time making sure the program is fiscally sound, while you've got this changing environment going on around it. Yeah. And so it's a tricky piece, but right now we're not looking at increasing the health care costs for the employees this year, and we are looking at a reduction in the dental plan, for example. We've negotiated a better rate for them on that. So those are the kinds of things we're doing at trying to take an active stance in managing the benefits package. Because that's my concern is, we haven't historically, from what I can tell, had an approach to benefits. It's always been, let's talk about this, let's talk about this, let's talk about this. Well, we need to look at the full picture and how it all fits together, and then how we can help our employees through all of that.
Thank you.
Wait, you were sitting next to me. You said no questions.
This is a question actually from the membership. Okay, so with all the teacher and support staff layoffs, how do you propose to improve student performance in the classroom? And is there going to be an increase in the class size that may affect the quality instruction?
Well, first, I think we made it widely known that we were overstaffed as a school district. And so we went back and we looked at our numbers of classroom size versus the state requirements, overall we were under the requirement. So we were actually staffing more staff than necessary to meet that level. So we went back and did a thorough analysis around that and what do we need as far as staffing and teachers in the school to support the class size that is mandated by the state. So we're not actually in a situation that may be a concern. We will have certified, competent, capable teachers in the classroom to the class size that it's directed by the state or a guideline by the state. So that component, we're right on around that. So the question is, how are we going to make a difference on the academic component? We're going to do that two ways primarily. In my visits to the schools, I would walk in from one classroom, across to the other classroom in the hallway, and see two different types of delivery of instruction and a model around that. I'd go from one school to another. And I talk to principals and teachers, etc. We need consistency on how we're delivering instruction and our model around that, around the standards of instruction. So Diana's moving forward with around that. We just went over our vision statement, our academic vision statement. That's inclusive of how we're going to come together around instruction and that model, what that looks like. The other component around that is that the success that I have seen with my teams of past have been around building effective school leadership teams in the schools around the utilization of assessment and data. We put a model in place when I was an area superintendent where we trained and certified small data teams in every one of our schools. Then we built the capacity to have instructional leadership teams of teacher leaders, assistant principal, meeting regularly, looking at assessment and data and metrics, and having good, meaningful discussion around analysis of it, what's driving the outcomes around the lack of around it, what are the instructional strategies or changes of instruction in the classroom, how do we get our attendance up, how do we get our dropout rate down at the high school level, and having good discussions around how you're going to approach that, how you're going to implement some level plan around it, and then how you're going to get out and monitor the success of it and look at student work and formative assessments to see growth. And you have to implement an assessment protocol that allows you to identify and measure your students' growth both horizontally during the school year and vertically for the grade levels. And you do that by using your benchmarks and some type of assessment. It says your students at this time in, let's say, January of school year, third grade, should be meeting or exceeding these benchmarks. But if you don't put an assessment in place to understand where your students are, then you can't get around the strategies and activities and the change of instruction that you need around that. ILTs do that. Instructional leadership teams do that. And so we implemented highly effective instructional leadership teams in all our schools when I was area superintendent, and we had a great capacity around taking that data, taking those assessments, doing the analysis around it, what's the impact, and what do we need to do differently to produce greater outcomes in student achievement and other metrics. Then we implemented very effective what are called PLCs, professional learning communities. Those are teams that meet by grade level or by content area that have an equal or deeper discussion around the content or grade level, around the data and the assessments and the metrics, and make those changes and get them in the classroom, get out there and look for evidence of that in instruction, and look for improvement around the performance through schoolwork and formative assessments. So a combination of how do you implement an assessment protocol throughout the year, how do you put effective school leadership teams in place, and that will also help drive your effective teaching in your classrooms through these school leadership teams as well. So by the end of the 2 years, when I was an area superintendent, we had highly effective and certified data teams in every school that could go in, pull the data out, manipulate it, package it, and give it to the ILT for their meetings in advance. They would have time to do the analysis around it, and then they would come back and have the discussion of what do we need to do differently, or what do we need to change in instruction to get our students to meet succeeds, or what do we need to do to get our students in seats for attendance. And then those PLCs did the same. So it's going to take us some time to put these school leadership teams in place. We have varying degrees from school to school around that. But we need to have consistency and uniformity around the instructional model and how we're putting school leadership teams in place, as I just said.
Another question that was put up is, can you compare the budget from last year to where we are now?
You got to let me have that one.
No, I got to take this one.
That wasn't a good one.
Okay. How many of you ladies are wearing a cubic zirconium? How many of you are wearing a diamond? This year's budget is a diamond. So, again, we're not here to cast aspersions on anybody, but what I have and the team I've been working with, as well as Mr. Mills and Dr. Green, we have spent days and hours and weekends trying to determine what the real story is. And so at the board meeting the other night, one of the board members asked, well, can you provide us last year's budget so we could compare it to this year's budget? And I made a statement that caused some eyebrows to raise, I think. But the reality was, I said, you've never had a real budget. So how could you compare it? It's like comparing the zirconium to the diamond. And so that is the big difference. At the end of this year, we will have a $10.3 million reserve balance. That's the state required minimum. This year, we're closing the year out at $6 million below zero. So a deficit of $6 million. So we had to make up that $6 million and $10.3 million in order to make the budget balance. And so that's a part of what we've been doing. So we looked at actual costs. What have we really been spending? And this goes back to the earlier question as well. When people said, well, why are we laying off so many teachers or other staff members? Because we laid off 96 at the central office as well. But the reason we did that was because schools should have had 30 teachers. And instead, the district had funded them at 45. But nobody knew it because it wasn't apparent in the budget. There was no way to see how many staff members were actually on the payroll with the budget the way it was done in the past. So this year we went through school by school, principal by principal, and said, now tell us who's on your payroll. Tell us who's in there. And then we started trying to compile a realistic budget because human capital is over 80% of your budget. So if you get that right, you're going to get the rest of it right too. So we did that, and we now feel pretty confident we know how many people actually work for us. So that's the biggest difference. Just think of the cubic zirconium and the diamond. She says she worked on the budget committee for 4 years, and they had never gotten that answer before of how many people worked in the district.
Okay. Another question from the membership. What can we expect to see as we move forward in the 2013 to 2014 school year for our teachers, for our principals, and are they qualified?
Okay. That's no problem.
It's an HR question.
HR, okay. Now I'm going to pull out my academic hat because I've worked both sides of the aisle. What can we expect to see? One thing we're going to expect to see is clear expectations for job performance at all levels, from the leadership level to the classroom level. It has to be clear what is expected in your job. Then once that's clear, then we have to provide the right support resources in there. So we're looking at a number of ways of how do we support the principals and teachers to grow and meet those expectations, which are continuing to grow and increase as the state's expectation increases. And the final piece is the one that's been missing. We have to have accountability systems. When you've given the expectation and you've given the support, and they don't meet the mark, then there has to be some type of consequence. And that may mean, and this is going to be difficult for the community in some cases, some principals who are very well liked in this district may not be a principal the following year because they're not doing their job. They're a great person and they're good with kids, but they're not able to move them forward academically.
I'd like to add a couple of other things that we have to move forward with this year. One, we need to work on and improve our teacher evaluation system. There are 3 different options in the state here: Danielson, Marzano, or a hybrid version of that. And this district adopted a hybrid version. We have to make an effective evaluation system, first of all, for the benefit of helping our teachers and giving them guidance to move forward in effective instruction and better instruction as an evaluation tool. The second component is that outline year salary increases for teachers will be tied to the performances. And so we have to have an effective evaluation system. I know I wrote this down, but I think we had, I want to say 400 teachers that weren't evaluated last year.
Somewhere around 30%.
Yeah. So we need to move forward with that, for one. We got to get better at that. We need to come together with our bargaining units and update our contracts. That's going to be critical in many ways, but one, aligned to the teacher evaluation and the teacher increases that have been funded by the state. How are we going to move forward with that? This year we have the option as a school district to give a kind of a blanket amount to teachers rather than tying it to an evaluation. Next year we will not have that option, so we have to improve our evaluation system. We are going to implement the leadership teams that I mentioned. We are going to have strategic plans within 2 years, all the way from the district down to the school level. And then when I have a way, as Don said, to hold people accountable in execution and performance. So when you do an individual evaluation with an employee, generally you're assigning goals that are measurable around performance. Well, you have to have that related to goals. So if you don't have organizational goals down to the level of the organization of folks in that team, then you're assigning goals that aren't aligned to anything in many cases. We need total alignment from the classroom to the superintendent level. We need to align that to our goals, to how we're going to move forward at every level, and then we have to align all our resources to make sure we're supporting those goals and those strategies and get out of the business of what I said, buying the idea of the month, spending money willy-nilly on things that we can't get our hands around or effective or producing the outcomes because we have no way to measure it.
I want to welcome both of you here today because this is just wonderful that we can get started on getting our education system going. I'd like to know a little bit more about this Common Core. What are the real standards for this, and how are we going to implement this?
First, Common Core was adopted by a majority of the states on a national level. It is a benchmark assessment or a standards assessment or benchmarks that are used to measure student growth and meets and exceeds and progress around that, both throughout the school year and for grade levels as you go through the grade levels. The state of Florida has chosen the Common Core. They're looking at the PARCC assessments right now as a tool to measure the performance around those standards, and our students meets, exceeds, or where they're at on that. But in essence, the Common Core in itself are just standards, or if you want a consistency or whatever. It could, some people say benchmarks, some folks will say standards, but it's standards by grade level and progressive years through the grade level of where a student graduates after 12th grade and what are the standards that have been met by that student and mastered and meets, exceeds.
Is this sort of an equalization type thing where you're going to have the same things for every student, or are every student going to have a different criteria?
A criteria around the standards?
Right.
No, the standards are applicable for virtually all the students, but more importantly, it's how you get the students to meet exceeds.
I see.
And how do you provide interventions or remediation or additional instruction or whatever to work with students, because you'll have students that if you do assessments throughout the year that won't be meets exceeds, so you're going to have to implement what we did, individual student development plans that address where they're at on the standard or not, what are the challenges around it, and how you're going to remediate or intervene on it at an
Now,
individual
all the
student
teachers
basis.
are going to be involved in this, or there's going to be special teachers for this, or is it just for the whole school?
One of the things we're
Everybody gets to
doing
do
with the
same
Modified
thing?
Wednesday is to provide instruction on the standards for Common Core and how to unpack them per se,
I see.
understand them, and deliver instruction that meets the standards at the grade level throughout the year and for outlying years. You want to add something?
Yeah, a couple of things I wanted to add. First off, one of the things that about Common Core that is really important to understand is it's measuring a different kind of knowledge. How many of you can tell me when the Battle of Hastings was fought?
Not too many.
Very good. That's exactly right. That's a kind of question you would have got on FCAT. Now, if you said instead, what was the significance of the Battle of Hastings and its role in shaping medieval Europe? That's a very different question, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It requires knowledge of content. It requires critical thinking and analysis. It requires creative thought and synthesis. If you all want to go back all the way to Bloom's, it stops at the bottom, and we're trying to move them to the top. Mm-hmm. And so the Common Core is built differently. So those standards aren't the same. All students will be expected to perform with the same standards. All teachers will be expected to teach to the standards. But what we have to do differently is ensure that every teacher knows how to meet this student's need, this student's need, and this student's need, because they all learn differently at different rates and they come with different backgrounds.
Okay.
And that's one of our charges as a school district, is to figure out how to do that and enable our teachers to do that in the classroom. That's part of what those half-day Wednesdays are all about.
That's what I think is most confusing to a lot of people who are totally against this Common Core, because they really don't understand.
Well, it's the standards. Mm-hmm. How you deliver and meet those standards for your students mm-hmm. is through the content instruction that you deliver. Mm-hmm. And so the Common Core itself is just the standards. And the PARC assessment is a way to assess the standards. And so I'd like to add what Don said. The question was asked earlier around the instruction, and I mentioned the instructional model. I could go into one classroom that I've been here, and I would see the typical teacher in front of the classroom in rows, conference teaching for 45 minutes. Okay, that tends to be teacher-centered instruction. But in order to get us to the higher order thinking skills that are part of the Common Core that assess higher order thinking skills around what Don just gave me an example of, we have to teach differently, because you have to teach in a way that's encouraging your students through cognitive engagement and constructivist learning techniques that engages your students. It's interactive. It's more student-centered than it is teacher-centered. And that's how you go through teaching higher order thinking skills. And that's how you assess your students and their ability to grasp it and teach differently.
I see. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Another one?
Okay, well, this will be the last question. So feel free to summarize what you've talked about, leave us with your final thoughts. The last question is just going to be what your single greatest challenge has been thus far. And like I said, feel free to give us your final thoughts.
One.
Not graying faster. Biggest single challenge. I think for me it's the need to change the culture. It really captures that. If you would go back to the transition team and a comment Don made earlier and that I've shared publicly, we have lost our focus on our core mission of instruction. So we have to change the culture here. We have to change the way we do business. It's just almost sad that statement has to be made, because we've not been meeting the needs of our students. And we owe it to them that's got to be the function and core mission of the school district, the district staff, the district team, our board members, our community members. We have to come together as a community and rally around the education system here to make a difference. And it's got to be a coordinated team effort. And I'll say this in a way, we all got to be on the same team. And I don't see that. I don't see it. I haven't seen it within the district team at the district level, and I haven't seen it in certain sectors beyond that. And we have got to get together and come together around this and And I think you all know what I'm talking about. That's got to stop. It really has to stop. We are not going to be successful if we're not in the same boat going in the same direction. Okay, it's okay to have productive conflict. I encourage that. I talked about it in my cabinet meeting today. Productive conflict is a good thing as long as it's professional, respectful, and done in a way that's constructive to move the organization forward. I'm going to say, as your superintendent, we have to come together as a county and as a community, as a leadership team, as vested, everybody's vested in education here, because all roads lead to students, and we get too caught up in the political side and not focus in the core mission of educating our kids. That's got to stop. It really does. Okay, we have to come together. And so for me, changing not only the culture in the district, but changing a culture and bringing everybody together to rally around that. And I know I said that in my interview. I believe you blur the lines in education from a superintendent perspective. You blur the lines between governance and management. You blur the lines between management and the members of your employee team. And you blur the lines between management and the district and the community. Because once you get everybody together on the same page, you have now increased your capacity for outcomes. But even more importantly, you increase your capacity outcomes, but now you have true shared accountability. We don't have shared accountability yet. And we don't have leverage capacity because there's too much politics going on and all this other stuff. We've got to come together. We've got to get behind education, and we got to do it that way.
Well, he made my job easy. Ditto.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for being here, Mr. Mills and Mr. Hall. We will see you all next month for our monthly meeting. It's always, of course, the last Tuesday of the month. And again, we thank you for coming.